So they revealed what we didn't know at the time was just like we saw in the dolphins, exact same thing in humans. People with higher C15 levels, less likely to develop type 2 diabetes, heart disease, fatty liver disease. So we're seeing this parallel story pan out. Humans, we have two sources. The primary source for most of the world is...
We figured out this C15 is almost like a wonder nutrient. I mean, can I call it that, or a wonder molecule? Like what?
Not only is C15 beneficial, but he's like, this is meeting the criteria of an essential fatty acid. This is like a once in a century discovery.
Well, we're back with an interesting episode of American Gravy. Lauren and I are here with Dr. Stephanie Venn-Watson. This is going to be an episode we're going to touch into nutrition, marine conservation, marine biodiversity, everything into food policy. So this one is going to kind of be a real wide conversation. And I think you're going to learn a lot about what we should be eating and some of the nutritional deficiencies in our diet in regards especially to the entire ecosystem. So we're really excited about this. Thank you so much for being here. This is always the cliched intro, but like, tell us about yourself. But give us a little bit about what, the project and what you've got going on.
Sure, absolutely. So I'm a veterinary epidemiologist, so not your typical starting story, right? But and I was working for the World Health Organization, other places, helping to set up disease surveillance systems all over the world. And then I was recruited about 20 years ago to help start and lead a clinical research program to continually improve the health and welfare of Navy dolphins. So, which is a little bit funny because I don't know how to swim. So,
No.
And I'm terrified of water.
Are you serious?
So who would know that would happen? Moved to San Diego. The Navy's taken care of this population of dolphins, about 100 bottlenose dolphins, for over 60 years. And they live in San Diego Bay. They go out in the open ocean every day. Every day they choose to come back. So it's really a remarkable place to be. And what we learned over time is that, Navy dolphins live a lot longer than dolphins in the wild. And if you look at dolphins in the wild, they live to about 20 years old. Dolphins at the Navy, are you ready for this? So the dolphins at the Navy are now routinely living into their 40s and 50s, with two dolphins this year turning 16 years.
60-year-old dolphins,
Yeah.
Flipper.
Yeah, exactly. So that allowed us to go in, and it's a big reason why I was brought in, was to understand healthy aging in dolphins for the sake of helping the dolphins. This had nothing to do about helping people. It was to say, hey, Steph, can you come in? We have half a century worth of data, health data, and can you help us take care of these older dolphins?
Well, what was the motivation for the Navy to want a larger, healthier dolphin fleet?
Right, and what are they doing with dolphins? Right?
Yeah. I kind of brushed over that.
It's a really fascinating story. The Navy had initially were looking at dolphins to understand their shape, to say, they're so fast in the water, could they develop a submarine that could mimic a dolphin shape and go on? That whole thing didn't actually work out, but what they did find, they had one dolphin named Tuffy, and Tuffy would go out into the open ocean and just hang out with them, like not leave, hang out. And they had an aquanaut program at the time in which they had aquanauts living down in the deep water to understand the influence of high pressure on people. So, but it was hard to deliver supplies to the aquanauts, and they figured out that Tuffy would be like, yeah, I can do that. So Tuffy would deliver supplies to the aquanauts.
So they trained dolphins to deliver supplies.
But how did that even work?
Right.
How did that?
They were just incredibly, I think they're entertained by us, to be honest. Anybody who surfs or who goes out in the ocean, everybody has a dolphin story. So they seek us out. And so Tuffy was more than happy to help. And so from there, they learned that dolphins were really good at being able to find lost objects in the sea. They could even detect enemy swimmers in the water and interdict. So it's easy peasy for them. And so the program's been around for 60 years.
And the Navy doesn't have to pay the dolphins. They don't have to put them on a pension plan. They don't have to worry about VA benefits.
Yeah.
I mean,
they take really good care of the dolphins. Hence, they were motivated. The Navy's been dedicated to taking good care of these dolphins for their entire lives.
So we know dolphins are really smart, but what would you equivocate that to on a human level? Do they have the brain of a 10-year-old? What's their mental capacity?
Their emotional equivalent. So they appear to have the maturity and capabilities of as adult humans.
Adult humans.
Yeah, and in some ways they surpass us, Andrew, because their parts of their brain can focus on things like sonar. So you hear where they do the clicks and the one, and that's how they're able to echolocate. So this is a skill that we don't have, but they can throw sounds out based upon how the sounds come back. They know the exact shape of what's out there. So which is how they can find out. So they tap into a part of their brain that we don't have. They can also do half brain hemispheric sleep. So they sleep one half brain at a time. So they never have to actually be, so you'll see one eye closed. That half of the brain is sleeping while the other, so they can have 100% vigilance all the time. So one could argue that their brains have evolved beyond ours.
Well, I sleep that way sometimes.
When I open. Yeah. I don't know. I'm not sure about you two.
Exactly. That's interesting. So like I see this game show here. Are you smarter than a dolphin?
Yeah. I love it.
So
love it. No.
So I look at, obviously I see all this through the prism of like longevity and health and chronic illness, etc. So the first thing that I wonder, and if dolphins are living in the wild 20 to 30 years, the dolphins that are being taken care of by the Navy are living up to 60 years. What's the difference? Like, why is it those dolphins are living longer?
Yeah, so they revealed what we didn't know at the time was by taking care of older dolphins that they would reveal a secret to longevity that's relevant not only to them, but to us. So what we found was that because they were allowed to get older, and in part is because of good care, they have, able to get, if they have an infection, they would get antibiotics. So it's almost like a developed country where they get better care. So they live longer. But what we also found is about 1 in 3 of the older dolphins would develop things like high cholesterol, chronic inflammation, even the pituitary changes consistent with Alzheimer's. They were looking like older people. So this really became fascinating for humans working in this area because this is a natural, large brain, long-lived mammal who is developing these diseases and conditions that are incredibly high importance to us and what dictates of whether we're aging healthfully or not. So we use this advanced technology called metabolomics to study thousands of small molecules in their archived serum and in their all-fish diet to see which small molecules predicted the healthiest aging dolphins without the omega-3s, because all they eat are fish. Right. And instead, it was this molecule, C15, pentadecanoic acid, an octane saturated fat that was the top predictor of the healthiest aging dolphins. Fast forward 10 years, there's now 100 peer-reviewed studies showing not only is C15 beneficial, but it's meeting the criteria of being the first essential fatty acid to be discovered in over 90 years. So thank you, dolphins. Yeah.
So C15 is the molecule that we have isolated, that you have isolated as being a predictor of longevity in life.
Yes.
And is that in conjunction with the omega-3s and some of the other essential fatty acids? Or would you say C15 actually is like...
surpasses them?
Yeah.
It's a good question. For the dolphins, it surpassed omega-3s. And even they found that by increasing the ratio of C15 to omega-3s, help predict healthier aging and therefore longer lived dolphins. And it's to help explain, C15 is a fatty acid just like omega-3s. And C15 is this an octane saturated fat, which means it has an odd number of carbons in it, so C15, and it has no double bonds. So that's what makes it a saturated fat. And so because of that, it's not susceptible to attack by oxygen. So it ends up being this Goldilocks fatty acid. It has the right length, the right amount of no double bonds, and it goes into our cell membrane. It helps protect our cells against attack by oxygen and basically helps prevent it from breaking down with age. There's this theory that came out from A.J. Holbert in Australia. He's in Australia, and he did this fascinating study showing that the more sturdy the fatty acids in your cell membranes, the longer a mammalian species lives. So he was able to show that sturdier fatty acids like C15 helped explain how humans and dolphins live longer than mice in the first place. So yeah, an evolutionary tool of longevity. We just needed the dolphins' perspective.
And where can we find this in foods? Like what foods should we be eating? What should we be drinking? Like where can we find this?
And furthermore, obviously the dolphins are getting it from seafood.
Where can we get this?
So yeah, exactly. Great question. So what we now know is just like we saw in the dolphins, exact same thing in humans. People have higher C15 levels, less likely to develop type 2 diabetes, heart disease, fatty liver disease. So we're seeing this parallel story pan out. And then when we look at the food sources for the dolphins, obviously their food source were fish. And for the dolphins, in the late 1990s, up until the late 1990s, they were eating a specific type of fish. And these were really fatty fish. In fact, they were so fatty that if you dry them out, stick a wick in it, and light it, and they were called candlefish because they had so much fat in them, delicious fat. So that fishery died out. So the Navy had to replace their fish types with different types of fish, and they actually kind of went toward lower fat fish because that's kind of where the world was heading. Lower fat is better. And so that's how we were able to see over the years this syndrome start creeping in on older dolphins, which we now know is due to lower C15. For humans, we have two sources. The primary source for most of the world is dairy fat. C15 is a marker of how much dairy fat we eat. That's how reliable of a source it is. And in countries that don't eat a lot of dairy fat, because I get that question a lot, the main source of C15 is from fish. And the main location of C15 in fish is the skin and the heads.
Question now into culinary, because I always talk about this. We always promote that everyone should be eating their fish with the skin on, and even if they're not eating it with the skin on, cooking it with the skin on. Is it is it composed inside the skin or the point at which the skin meets the flesh?
That's a great question. I don't know for sure. It could be both, but that is a really good question. But definitely involves, if you take the skin off, you're going to miss out on all of the wonderful stuff. And
doing it wrong this entire time.
I was too, and I'm half Chinese, and on the Chinese side of my family, the person of honor at the table gets the head of fish, and now we're all these things all of a sudden start making sense. It's like, that's where all the C15 is in the skin and the head.
Well, it's an interesting parallel because what we see now with food is nose to tail, right? Like, we're eating a lot of the off meat, the liver meat, the organ meat, the cheek meat, the head, all of it. And we're finding out that how packed they are with all these nutrients. And then of course there's been like a kind of a culinary movement to make that type of meat a little bit more center plate. And the same with seafood. And we do the fish with the head on, et cetera. And you go to any of the communities around here, especially we're next to, Westminster, Fountain Valley, Garden Grove, which is the largest Vietnamese community outside of Vietnam, and they all eat with the head on. When you look at the data and the differences in their diets, of course, and longevity, as you talk about, because this is all about, it's biohacking, right? Like, people want to live longer.
Right.
And that's what it comes down to. And it's like, they say there's so many variables that are leading to our chronic disease, and especially in the Western diet, right? And that's what I find fascinating. I focused for years and through the Aquarium of the Pacific on trying to get people to eat more seafood, more of the right types of seafood from a marine conservation perspective. But we were looking at the Western diet and how little we consume when it comes to seafood. We're one of the lowest, 16 pounds per capita of seafood in the U.S. versus like over 100 in Japan. In Japan, they don't consume dairy.
Yeah.
But they consume so much seafood and they live longer than we do. Now, what's really interesting about that, and I'm going to go full circle here, is we've talked about seed oils, right?
Right.
And everyone says, well, the Japanese, everything is with seed oils. But I always counter that with, well, that's true, but it's about the ratio of the omega-6s to the omega-3s, which once was like 2-to-1, 3-to-1, is now 20-to-1 in a Western diet. In a Japanese diet, because they eat so much seafood, they're minimizing that ratio. So even with the consumption of the seed oils, which we know is a hot topic nowadays. So to that point, when you talk about the ratio of the C15 to the omega-3s, is that a similar function as the ratio of the omega-6s to the 3s? And is that because of oxidation?
Yep. Yeah, that's it. You hit the nail on the head. So the omega-6 to omega-3 is this, pro-inflammatory. Like, the higher the 6s, the more inflammatory the state is. You got to get that ratio down, right? So the omega-3s are higher. And the same thing with C15 to any really polyunsaturated fatty acids like omega-3s, omega-6s, the seed oils, that all of these introduce these. Basically, the more double bonds that you have present, the easier it is for oxygen to attack. And we know when oils sit out, they go rancid. They go rancid because it's this oxygen attacking these double bonds. And this happens in our body over time. The irony is, like, oxygen, which is what we need to live, in the end ends up being the thing that
that kills us.
Just slowly, cell by cell. So, the ability for our cells to maintain that resilience over time is really, like we said, Fulbert helped reveal, is the trick to longevity. It's how long can we fight off our inevitable demise due to oxygen.
It's an addiction. It's an addiction to oxygen that's killing us.
Exactly.
Oh my God.
Don't stop breathing.
You will die that way.
Yeah, that will be a much quicker way. We'll not live a long time.
So the C15, okay, so now we figured out this C15 is almost like a wonder nutrient. I mean, can I call it that, or a wonder molecule? Like what?
Yeah, and based on the data, which is the reason for the book. So, right, that we made these initial discoveries in the dolphins. We did 8 studies over 3 years alongside the leader in fatty acids, Dr. Ed Dennis. And he was an editor-in-chief for the Journal for Lipid Research for 15 years. And so we approached Ed with this hypothesis about C15. He's like, well, highly unlikely. We all know about C15. It's just this trace fatty acid that measures how much milk you're drinking. But the dolphin angle is interesting. So if you did these studies, that you could test out your hypothesis. So we did. And at the end of it, we published this paper with Ed showing not only is C15 beneficial, but he's like, this is meeting the criteria of an essential fatty acid. This is like a once in a century discovery. So with that, and now importantly, there have been other teams around the world who've been valid, and this is what you need science to, revalidating that C15 meets the criteria of essentiality. Independent teams in Canada, France, China, all coming up with the same, and then just a wealth of information, understanding how C15 works, how we need certain levels in our cells in order to support our metabolic, immune, heart, liver, health, our whole body health. Because of that, all the science would be why, it is a wonderful essential nutrient. Yeah,
that's amazing.
So fast forward, you're like, what can I do to help people get this C15, right? So then you create Fatty 15. So tell us a little bit about that and how you got there.
All of the studies I've shared that we did were all funded by the Office of Naval Research. First to help the dolphins, but then it was like, oh, wait a second, we can help the dolphins and have a spin-out benefit to help people too. So the Navy, Office of Naval Research actually funded us to develop a pure bioavailable C15 ingredient that could help solve for, because it was getting harder and harder to find fish that had enough C15 in it for the dolphins. So it was first to say, can you create a supplement for the C15 supplement for the dolphin?
Okay.
Wow.
And so while we were creating it, we're like, well, we might as well make it pure, really high quality, and make it vegan friendly too. So we did that. So we developed this molecule, and we actually thought we were going to be moving it forward as a drug for a whole new disease called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. It's going through a rebrand called Mazzled, but that's for the nerdy.
Yeah.
But this disease didn't exist before 1980. Mayo Clinic found 8 to 30 people with this disease, and they published that. Today, 38% of the population has this liver.
And why is that? I've heard a lot about this recently. Why is that?
So interestingly, Lauren, we found that same disease in the dolphins. So you're like, what's going on? And then it comes full circle around of C15 deficiency is now emerging as a driver for this whole new disease that showed up on our doorstep.
Okay, so fatty liver disease pre-1980 didn't exist. What happened around 1980?
1977, Congress came out and released dietary recommendations for all Americans. And those recommendations, because I was 5 at the time, so I was I don't want to say a victim of it, but I was influenced by those recommendations. So 1977, so those recommendations came out because there was this increase and alarming increase in obesity and type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease. That was being attributed to saturated fats in the diet. And so these recommendations really focused on all Americans shall decrease their intake of all saturated fats, especially by reducing their intake of whole fat milk and butter. So what we didn't know at the time, because now we can fast forward to today, 1977, the prevalence of obesity was 14%. Today, it's 43%. the incidence or the prevalence of diabetes. There were 4 million Americans with type 2 diabetes. Today, there's 24 million. So that didn't fix. So let's just start with that change didn't fix that problem. And now the leading hypothesis is that because we basically took away C15 or decreased it from the diet. That was in 1977. In 1990, that then changed to pediatricians telling mothers that when their child turns 2, I got that piece of paper, when Ben, my child, turned 2, that he needed to go off whole fat milk and move to low fat or non-fat milk.
Yep.
So that happened in the 1990s. So we have 2 important phases, 1977 and 1990, where we then led to a dramatic decrease in our C15 intake. 3 years later, after that initial recommendation, right, we start seeing this disease emerge and then take off. So now the concern is that we have these generations that have been born into a C15 deficient world, in part because of agricultural changes. The more grass cows eat, the higher their C15 levels. So, as agricultural changes have occurred, even whole dairy fat, as we knew it before, has different C15 levels than it does today. So, yeah.
So, and just, I want to touch on the fact too, prior to 1980 and the move away from saturated fats, there was the introduction of hydrogenated fats and trans fats and margarine, and really essentially turning seed oils into butter, right? Omega-6 fatty acids, getting butter out of everything, getting meat out of everything, stop eating that. I mean, high cholesterol was the biggest concern. We can get into the conspiracy theories, which I do in other episodes, as to who was funding all of that and encouraging people to eat more carbs and sugars and less saturated fats. But the reality is we all started consuming less saturated fats, which brought down our C15, therefore leading to not only the proliferating these other chronic diseases, but also the introduction of fatty liver disease. And that brings me to my question about the feed, right? So you mentioned cattle and you mentioned beef. So we also started to see the monoculture cropping in America of like soy and corn and just these high omega-6 feeds where you just fatten the cows. And now there's a huge conversation about whether grass-fed and grass-finished beef is higher in nutrients versus grass-fed. Because most cattle is grass-fed, but corn-finished or soy or fattening them at the end. And what you're suggesting is that the grass-raised, grass-finished is much higher in the C15, which is the primary fatty acid we should be focused on in regards to reducing chronic disease and increasing longevity.
Yeah, this is what the studies are supporting, right? Yeah. So is that, and even studies even going as far as showing that not only is feeding grass-fed leading to the highest C15 levels, if you feed them high-altitude grass from the Alps,
interesting,
they'll have higher C15 levels in there. So if you take a sea level cow and you feed it grass that's grown in the Alps, it's a C15. That cow's C15 levels will be higher. So there are ways that we can influence C15 levels. And one way that was found out was if you go to Sardinia, right, where there's a blue zone population there, and in Italy. And this is a mountainous region, which is a high longevity blue zone. And they eat a lot of dairy fat, but their dairy fat comes from local goats and sheep that feed on the grass. And then what they do is they'll take that fat and they make it into cheese. And obviously it's high altitude grass because it's a mountainous area. So they kind of have the trifecta then of concentrating the fats in the cheese. And the cheese is called pecorino. And pecorino has some of the highest C15 level cheeses out there. The Sardinian population, they've replaced meat for the most part with cheese. And so they are getting lots of C15 source. And so they have C15 levels that are 3 times higher than the average rest of the world.
Oh my gosh, all we need to do is eat cheese?
That's me.
More cheese?
I probably eat a pound of cheese a day. Pecorino Romano, Parmesan,
pecorino.
red cow parm.
Okay,
I
so
could go on about
me too.
Grano Padano.
Is that real?
Yeah, no, that's real.
Okay.
That's real.
Yeah, my C15 levels are in the Sardinian zone.
So I have a question for you. Let's take it back to like the milk, right? Like feeding kids from whole milk to, low fat milk. Does it have to do anything too with like the formula? Because I feel like in that time, breastfeeding wasn't really a thing. It was like formula. I feel like doctors were pushing formula on kids as well. So does that have anything to do with like maybe the deficiencies with C15?
It does. Yeah, it was a really good question. So we haven't been leading that effort. This has been entirely different teams have been looking at, given C15's emergence as essential. We've been focusing on the older part, how it protects us against health, protects healthy aging. Other groups have been saying, wait, what about kids and infants? And so what they've shown is that the more C15 mom has from her diet, especially cheese from her diet when she's pregnant, the more C15 she has, the more C15 baby gets. And the more C15 baby gets, the baby gets it both as a fetus, but it also gets its primary source is through breast milk. And the more C15 baby gets from mom, the better that baby grows, the better their brain development. And there's a study, it's called the Eden cohort study in France, showing following mother-baby pairs over a long period of time. And they showed that up to 3 and even 6 years old, those babies that got more C15 from mom have better cognitive development overall, as well as specific language abilities. C15, if we have moms with increasingly lower C15, then even breast milk could be low in C15. Infant formulas, for the most part, most have no C15 in them. So this is, Lauren, exactly like you smartly called out, an emerging question and problem. So there again, this is whole other groups of people saying we need to pay attention to what is happening through infant formula that is not fortified with C15. And there was a piglet study that was done because piglets are as close to human infants as any other animals. And they know that if a piglet is fed milk replacer versus sow's milk, it doesn't grow as well. It has gut issues, and they're kind of poor growers. So what they did is they gave the piglets, in a way to see could this be helpful for humans, they supplemented those piglets milk replacer with C15. And they showed that those piglets grew up as healthy as those fed on sow's milk, but versus the ones on just milk replacement. So they had better gut health. They had better mitochondrial health. They even looked at that. And they had better daily body growth. So
wow,
really big and important question of how do we get C15 at the earliest stages too.
With all these studies, are they going to start supplementing C15 in the formula, or how is that?
We're working on it. There's an important movement that's happening right now. There's been a call for papers in science from something that's called Operation Stork Speed by the government. And they want to understand the nutrients for infants hasn't really been evaluated thoroughly since the 1990s. So they said since 1998, what new news has come out that might help influence and improve upon infant formula nutrition and infant nutrition?
Yeah.
So obviously we're helping to provide all the science to help get that moving.
My head goes to just getting the cows from the high.
Yeah, right.
Right.
We all need to move to start.
Yeah, exactly. Get those cow's milk.
Well, so on the cheese piece, really quickly, I just want to clarify. So is it the harder aged cheeses? It's obviously not the softer, creamier cheeses.
They'll have C15, but exactly to your point that they'll have the hard cheeses, aged cheeses have higher amounts of C15. And if you get to the cheeses that are fermented, will actually break down the fatty acids even more to be in a more bioavailable form.
Back to the grass-fed beef. Is it in the meat that you're getting the C15, or is it in a dairy product?
So most people get it from the dairy products, but there's for sure C15 is present in the fat, in ruminant fat. So that's in the meat of cows, lamb, and sheep.
Okay.
Yeah. In Australia, so for example, in Australia, the beef have significantly higher C15 levels. And also, if you look at grass-fed Australian lamb, is the highest C15. The second highest is grass-fed Australian cow beef. So Australia is kind of checking the box.
Yeah. And then in terms of the isolation, so now we get to you. So you've been able to isolate the molecule, and you're creating fatty 15, right? Which is essentially the C15 supplement, if you will. How are you doing that without giving away any proprietary secrets? Are you just isolating it through food? Is it being done through a chemical process?
Right. So again, because we thought, well, gosh, we're going to be moving this forward as a pharmaceutical, we went that route. So, and we wanted to make it vegan, and we wanted it pure, and we wanted it to be identical to all the research that's been done on it, so that we could trust that this molecule would do what we're hoping it would do, right? So we take C14, which is readily abundant in plants, so especially coconut and nutmeg, but it's just a pure C14, and then we add a carbon onto it. Okay. So it's bioidentical to what's in nature. It's 99.8% pure, and it's the exact same molecule that's used in all these studies. And, that is why with Fatty 15, is just sharing with Lauren, Andrew, that Inc. 5000 list just came out last month. And we are with one ingredient in one supplement, we are the fastest growing supplement company in America.
Wow.
Isn't that amazing?
And for me, that's, it's not about marketing. It's that we have a molecule, that we have a wonderful, unexpected discovery, groundbreaking discovery from the dolphins. We have a responsible, pure, sustainable ingredient. And we have the science. And so when people take it, we have 70% of our customers report feeling benefits within 16 weeks. And our retention rates, we have 95% monthly retention rate on our supplement, which is unheard of. And it's because it's working.
And what are people seeing when they're taking the supplement? Like, what are they feeling? How do they look different? Like, what is,
Right. We know that for long-term health, right? So for longevity, with regard to metabolic and heart and liver, immune health, that there's lots of studies showing and supporting not only that people with higher levels have better long-term health, but we understand at the level of the cell, the mechanisms of action of how it does it. As we started getting Fatty 15 out to the world, we started having people report, like, I'm sleeping better. I can prove it because my Oura ring. And we're like, that's placebo. That's great that you're saying it, but it's placebo. And then I started experiencing it. And I'm like, oh my, I'm like, okay, this is strange. So we started a survey way back when we launched it in 2021. And consistently since then, those are the top 3 things that half of our customers feel within 2 weeks: deeper sleep, calmer mood, and less joint pain. And we now know that it's because the science has continued, and that C15 helps 2 things. It helps make a second molecule that activates the receptors in our brain and body that are cannabinoid receptors. So the receptors that we initially identified as respond to cannabis, they're not there for cannabis, right? They're there for this metabolite of C15.
So obviously we want people to buy the supplement, Fatty 15, but just generally speaking in our diets, like, what are the primary areas in which we can be consuming foods to increase our C15? Yeah,
Andrew, it's a really good point. So the point of the supplement is truly, it's to supplement the diet, right? So this is not meant to replace, it's an all-in effort. So the supplement is part of the solution. A lot of the things that we've talked about, sustainable fisheries, eating having the whole fish, having grass-fed dairy, all these are part of the solution. But recommendations from to an individual are grass-fed dairy fat, high-quality grass-fed dairy fat, focusing on those cheeses, being able to eat fiber. So fiber will actually feed microbes in our gut, and those microbes can make some amount of C15.
Okay.
So eating fiber, it can't make enough to get us up and over what we need, but it's additive, right? And then exercising also helps to release C15 in our tissues and get it into our blood and helping to work. So fiber, high quality grass-fed dairy fats, exercising, and then supplementation.
Which has been, I think, a movement, especially within this Maha world. That's what people have been talking about. And so many of us have been really pushing on the culinary side, the nutrition side. But some of it is just because we know what the evidence is by virtue of our bodies or other anecdotal evidence. But really now you've kind of isolated it. It's the C15.
Yeah. It's an important part of this story. It's essential. We've been taking it out. So we've undergone a 50-year experiment of taking it out, and we've just seen what happened. But what's exciting is nutritional deficiencies like vitamin C deficiency and scurvy and vitamin D deficiency and rickets. It's fixable, right? And so let's just get it back in our diet. Start eating I'm ready for some whole fish.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know if I am. I will try the skin on, though.
Okay, there you go.
I'll start there.
A huge step.
So let's talk about the book really quickly. If you want to just give us this, it is really a lot of what we've been talking about, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So the book was because I have a weekly blog where I share, there's so much science coming out about C15, probably a new peer-reviewed paper every 1 to 2 weeks. Not from us, from others. So the blog every week is like, here's the latest science that came out on C15. So Simon & Schuster had been reading the blog, little did I know, and they reached out and said, hey, Steph, this is a book. Like the whole Dolphins, origin story, the science that's building. And I said, but the science isn't done yet. And they're like, yeah, it's never going to be done.
Yes.
You have enough. They're like, how many studies are there? I'm like, 100, one more. And they're like, yeah, that's a book. So it's meant to be raise awareness, help underline and ensure, like to emphasize there is science. There's a lot of science and we can't explain it away anymore. So that's a big to talk about the nutritional deficiencies. And then Simon & Schuster came up with the title. They're like, this is a longevity nutrient. So we have a whole chapter describing how C15 meets all these rare criteria of what's called the geroprotector, which is a molecule that can stem the diseases that kill us, therefore allowing us to live healthier, longer. It's a holy grail of healthy aging. We worked with Dr. Nick Short, head of NIH's Longevity Consortium. And Nick was like, this is a geroprotector. So we worked together on that chapter to show how. Yeah.
That's so great. And in the Fatty 15, the supplement, where can people get that?
Amazingly, at fatty15.com.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
And,
that makes it
on
easy.
Amazon as well. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes it easy. I mean, this is so much. I feel like we need a part 2 to this.
I know. I feel like I learned so much.
I know.
This is great.
This
is
is wonderful.
Yeah. And we're excited to kind of see where we go next, where you go next. I'd like to have a follow-up conversation too, where we can really hone in on the seafood piece of this, because I think that the health of our oceans, et cetera, in relation to the dolphins, it sounds like there's some good information there too that can, at least marine biologists can look at in terms of like helping and keeping the oceans healthy.
And I will say, Chef Gold, thank you for your incredible contributions, both of you, to sustainability in the oceans. So really incredibly appreciative.
Well, thank you. Well, this was awesome. Look forward to talking more. We're in the restaurant right now, so obviously we got customers coming in, and I'll get back to the kitchen. But this was amazing.
Amazing.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you both.